Welcome back to Fine Art Review. Today we're going to look at a painting by John Singer Sargent, a British painter who's, well, I mean, if you're a painter, I don't have to tell you who he is. If you're not a painter and just an art enthusiast and doesn't know who John Singer Sargent is, one of the world's most famous portrait painters, but he also did a fair amount of landscapes, which is something we'll be looking into today. And when I think about Sargent and I think about his landscape paintings, naturally a lot of watercolors come into mind, but this is an oil painting, and one of the paintings that first pops into my mind for sure. This is a painting of the Mojave Desert. Here we have it. I think this painting is in the Tate Museum in England, in London, but I just love it. I think it's the Mojave Desert. Something that's really interesting with Sargent's approach to painting landscapes is, I don't know if it's the primer or if he's done a huge amount of work before, because he has so much textures in his paintings, something that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of. But if we're looking, there's brushstrokes in here, a lot of brushstrokes in here, it's clear, and the same goes here. It's almost like, I don't know if he's painting with a lot of paint pre-hand and then sort of dry brushing on top. There's definitely dry brushing in here, but then you have also these type of areas that are completely smooth. There's no texture in here. So sometimes I've wondered if it's the remains from an old painting or not. And it's really difficult to say sometimes, because even here the texture sort of ends at these mountains. So I'm curious to see what his approach to some of these bigger paintings were, because this, if I remember correctly, it's quite big. It's not huge, but quite big. But there is a lot of texture, especially when it comes to these sort of gravel looking or small type of rock areas. This is something that's interesting. I don't know how many times I've looked at this painting and I've never seen this. That's cattle right there. Definitely. With some farmers or shepherds, or if not shepherds because there's not sheep, but I can't believe I haven't seen that. This is a type of road that's built, or if it's a wall to sort of keep in the cattle. But either way, something that Sargent is obviously really good at is painting landscapes, and he had a preference to paint close-ups, so things that weren't too far away. I think I read on someone's blog or something about that Sargent said you shouldn't be painting further away than whatever, 10 meters or something like that, and someone else said you shouldn't be painting closer than that. And I think maybe this painting is an example of why Sargent preferred to paint up close more. I don't know if he had bad vision or if he struggled to do like small details in terms of a distance. I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't think he had any struggles. I take that back. I don't think he had any struggles in terms of painting anything really. But normally we see him painting foreground rather than distant views. But he does this really well. I love the lighting effect that happens in the shadowy parts in the distance here. It's clear that is what do you call it? Conglomerate? Is it conglomerate? There's a white rock here, and the bottom part is more of a red rock, and you have that sort of ridge separating the two. You find these in the Grand Canyon, you find these in Catalonia, in Spain, in an area. To me it's quite clear. The white part up here is more grayish, more colder. The bright parts down here are looking more warm and red. And here you have some clear red as well. But something that's always fascinated me about Sargent's approach to painting is those sort of indications of details rather than finely described details through amount of information or whatever. Obviously it has sort of an effect type of style when it comes to these sort of dry brush techniques in the foregrounds to create texture that works in some areas and doesn't in others, I suppose. But just here the shadow it's not thought about too much. There's a shadow there, so let's paint a shadow there. Same here, definitely a sort of rhythm and system to it, but without being repetitive. He's definitely keeping his consciousness with him and making conscious decisions in terms of the designs and whatnot. This is cool, some rocks here. Shadows are clearly darker here, more warmer in the lights than what it is over here. I'd say sharper edges maybe, just to indicate that they're closer, but also giving that sort of helping that with the water in the back of the rocks, sort of bringing them forth so they're closer to us than this is. It's not only the decisions of the values and temperatures in here, or the colors. Clear, it's an aspect of it, but Sargent is such a incredible painter that there's no, I don't think there's rules that he would sort of not use to his advantage. Look at the complementaries here, that's very nice. Something he also did was to keep this type of shadows really warm and vibrant in the sense of colorful and color temperature plays or whatever you want to call it, sort of dancing in there. Something that he did. You can see in his landscapes a lot of times this type of brownish red. I wonder what color that is. Because he had I think he had a mixed palette. So I think he had like an earth palette for portraits, but I think he also included a lot of colors in it. He had a very, it's I have it somewhere. Yeah, exactly. So he had an earth palette, but he had a modern palette too. So he had for these landscapes probably. Yeah, so he used both cadmiums and vermilion and cobalts and stuff like that on his palette at the same time as he was using sort of raw umber and burnt sienna maybe. Was there burnt sienna? It's probably a Mars brown or something like that, maybe mixed with a blue and some more like red lead or something. But either way, I don't know, it's not a lot to say about this landscape. I mean, Sargent was such a technical person that sometimes I feel like it was always about that when he painted something, to sort of show the technical solutions to stuff, to its sort of peak of being as effective as possible. But something that is interesting with this painting is I feel like there's some sort of mixed light in it, so I'm sure he did it over several sessions, but the shadows from the bushes here, they seem quite long and they seem very warm, very distinct light part and shadow part, and even though they're quite low, some areas are completely in shadow. But if you're looking over here, it doesn't feel like the shadows are very long. They feel kind of short. So it looks to me like there's a mixture of light effect in here. So through speculations, I would say that's painted from early afternoon until towards afternoon. But if it's in the Mojave Desert, I'm not sure about how the light works there. Maybe this is still quite early because the sun is quite high up. Something that's also really nice, look at this. The clouds here, they're just perfect. They're not necessary at all. They don't have to be there, but he decided to put some clouds in there, and they're perfect in terms of value and color, in my opinion. It's always tricky to get a sky feeling exactly like a sky, especially if it's this clear. I do enjoy the sort of design brushstrokes type of skies when you can see that it's painted, but it's always creating a little bit of too much noise maybe, and the sky mostly feels like it's quite unified, if you will, in reality, in comparison to painting. But either way, this is just spot on. I feel like this is something that 100% I'd find outside. Using that much red in the clouds is also something that's super effective. You don't see that until you see that, sort of, when you're starting. In the beginning, when you start to paint, you don't really see that there's a lot of red in those type of clouds. And here is also a good example of what Sargent did with his horizon. You can see here that it's a clear change in both color and value. Just before the horizon, I wouldn't say this is the extreme horizon maybe, but just before that horizon there's a purple. You're going for this from this type of, what is it, maybe orangey type of blue, sort of green blue, orangey type of blue, to the purple and down in value, which is definitely something that happens and sort of helps with the value compression as well. Something that sort of keeps you a bit more organized in that big impression. Look at this. Loving this. So cocky, this man, huh? He knew exactly what he was doing. Look at that. It's just a smear of blue on top. Like, well, let's take some cobalt and ceruleum and finished. But then again, like with the texture just ending there, because it's something that about the texture, it feels sort of planned out, but it also feels really random. Like because you see the texture here to here as a sort of brush stroke, it makes this area almost flat in a way. If you're looking at the texture, if you can ignore that and sort of look at just the atmospheric perspective or whatever, then it's fine. But in some areas it actually sort of breaks the perspective apart a little bit too much, because it doesn't seem like it's planned out as a gestural form. It feels as if it's painted as a flat structure surface to sort of help indicate texture or information, giving him sort of some type of effect when he's dry brushing. I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of it, to be honest. It works here, maybe here it feels a bit more planned out. I mean, it is definitely planned out, but not in terms of its gesture. He could have sort of used that to his benefit in order to sort of describe the perspective a bit more. Look who's cocky now, huh? Criticizing Sargent on his techniques. I mean, don't get me wrong. Anybody that can paint like Sargent should be honored for life, because it's amazing. The technical aspects of his painting was just fascinating, and not only like brush techniques and concepts, but also the ideas of his paintings in terms of their composition, and even like criticized symbolism in some sense, you know. Those type of things are also really, really interesting with Sargent, but that isn't my area of expertise, so I'll stay away from that. Yeah, I think that's it for this one. We say thank you to John Singer Sargent, and again, if you enjoyed this, please leave a comment, maybe suggestions of artists I could look at in the future for the upcoming videos. Please please subscribe to the channel, and like the video if you enjoyed it. I mean, like it either way, but that's it for now. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.